And welcome back to Sovereign Sanity, a source of sovereign clarity and expansion. This is video number 3. In the last video, we reviewed the cycle of sovereignty and how the definition of sovereignty appears to have changed over time from what was originally known as the sovereign individual and what's now known or believed to be sovereign governments. For today's video, we're going to expand on this visualization. We're going to take a closer look at the significance of rights and freedoms, but in particular, how authority was established, as well as the requirement for individual consent. But first, a couple of important notes before we move forward. I think it's important to review the difference between a focused, intentional, open debate platform and what I would describe as a lesser focused, perhaps unbalanced gossip platform. Now, if the goal is learning or progress or growth or expansion, it seems safe to say that that goal would most directly and efficiently be accomplished in an open, intentional debate platform. Now, although this goal can still be accomplished in a roundabout way through a lesser focused gossip-based platform, I think it's safe to say that it's a much less direct and efficient method for the learning process. Next, it's important to review sovereign integrity. Now, there's a lot that can go into the word integrity. So if I had to try to bring forward a cluster of descriptors to add clarity and value to this word, I would describe integrity as having a lot to do with openness and awareness and truth and trust, wisdom, intelligence, and perhaps a greater understanding of the significance of boomerangs and what goes around comes around, vibrations, polarity, and balance. So on the subject of sovereignty, I'd like to take a closer look in particular at violence versus peace. Now, there's a chance that for some viewers that may be watching this video series with ideas of sovereignty, that you may view those with thoughts of sovereignty as a radical group of individuals with a tendency to quickly resort to violence should their thought processes or authority be challenged at any point in time. So having said that, I think it's important that at this point in the creation of this video series that I distinguish myself. I, for one, am not part of any organized sovereign group. As far as I'm aware, that's not even something that's accurate. It's not an accurate descriptor of true sovereigns. As sovereign to me starts with an individual, as we're about to explain. So if someone were to ask me, do you have integrity? I would most certainly respond, yes. And should you, the viewer, decide to evaluate that statement, I'm sure with a little bit of effort, you'll find an abundance of data that would allow you to make a final determination for yourself. But as far as peace, I would describe myself on the far end of the spectrum of violence, as my intentions are most certainly rooted in peaceful interactions and peaceful resolutions. Now, the final point before we move forward has to do with our key subject matter for today, that being authority. Now, integrity and authority have a lot to do with each other, but there's two key aspects of consideration related to authority that I would like to bring to the surface. Because it appears to me that in order for authority to be active or valid, it must both be recognized and defendable. Let's move forward. But first, a quick overview of the information that was put forward in the last video to help us interlink the key focuses and expansion intended for this video. So we started the visual with picturing the first human beings as we followed the growth of humanity, noting the significance and perhaps point of unified awareness of the importance of peace, rights, freedoms, human dignity, and social progress. So what we're going to do is take a closer look at this significance related to specifically the development of authority along the way, and of course, noting the ultimate significance of the individual voice as part of the learning process. Now, depending on your overview of the information put forward in the last video, you may agree that although we reviewed the difference on how the definition of sovereignty may have changed, we still didn't really answer the question, who then has supreme power authority, the individual or the government? So I'm going to be doing my best as a process of putting forward today's visual to answer that question. And one question that will help us to lead into exploring the growth and the development of authority would be, who has supreme power authority over what? So as we dive into this, we're going to start again with the original individuals, the first human being or human beings. It's easy, once again, to picture supreme power authority when you're thinking about one, the first human being, human spirit, or human energy, the original individual. But then when one comes to two and two becomes three, that's when the consideration of authority becomes more relevant. So let's move toward describing the development of authority in a three-step process, starting with, once again, two becoming three, three becoming more. So what does that mean? We have your original individual tribe status and beliefs. And that's where the consideration for being recognized and defendable starts to come into play. Because you really have to picture what's happening, what's important to these beings at that time. Well, one important note is the only other opposing authority, I would say, would be nature itself, the elements, and survival. So what's important to these beings? Survival. Now, as they determine a belief system, as their tribe starts to grow, I would imagine there's certain acknowledgments that are valued toward their survival, such as who is the strongest or fastest, or perhaps can figure things out the most efficiently, the smartest, to help with the survival of their tribe. So that would have been the foundation for the tribe to originally recognize these things that are important related to their survival and decide as a group that they were going to defend what they had recognized as important beliefs. Now, as we continue to reflect on what I would describe as a likely and logical series of events related to authority, the first question of authority, other than what had already been established by the individual tribes, would relate to areas of land. Because what's happening now is the original individual tribes would start to cross paths with other tribes. So combined tribal beliefs would have to eventually be formed. But let's picture the process taking place. You're an individual tribe, you're out and about, and all of a sudden you cross paths with another group or tribe. At that point, I would imagine for a period of time, the survival instinct perhaps would have led the tribes to violence. Maybe not intentionally, but instinctually at that point. And perhaps that continued for a period of time until, I would say it's likely and logical that at some point the tribes would figure out, perhaps rather than harming each other, we would do well to observe each other and move forward from there, which essentially would have been the first essence of the sensation of peace. Whether or not these beings knew what that word was all about at that time, I can't say for sure. But this essence of maybe there's another way aside from harming each other. So the deeper thought process is leading them to eventually getting to a point where they have combined, recognized, and defendable beliefs. So it would have started with the original considerations to areas of land, which when two tribes are combining, I would imagine it would have originally had to do with hunting, where and when, and considerations, and whether they were spoken or unspoken agreements at the time. That's probably one of the first considerations, because survival is a key factor that was relevant to both tribes or all tribes. So as they move forward and continue to interact and cross paths with each other, while it's great, but I think the extension for the consideration of authority started to become more relevant when perhaps one tribe would steal from another tribe or cause harm or take advantage of a member of one or the other tribes, or even worse, including death of a member of a tribe. And I would imagine as those things started to happen, either by accident or intentionally, there may have once again been the tendency for violence, sort of an eye for an eye. And for a period of time, maybe that continued until what I like to describe as uniquely intelligent, thoughtful individuals within those tribes eventually would have spoke up and said something like, wait a minute, if survival is the goal, should we continue this routine or habit of going back and forth harming each other and reducing the numbers of our tribes? Doesn't that go directly against survival? So maybe there's another way. And this is the point that I like to describe as when humanity could no longer deny the sensations, the vibrations that were created through violent interactions. And they could no longer deny the desire for a peaceful moment as compared to a violent moment. So through this process of acknowledging this, the foundation of rights and freedoms was established. Humanity would draw the line and moving forward acknowledge the importance of peace, rights, freedoms, human dignity, and social progress. So then, tribes would become towns, towns would become cities, so on and so forth. Beliefs would become laws, and as we move into modern history, the introduction of acts and statutes. So the systems of being recognized and defendable related to the development of authority had to continue to develop with the growth of humanity. So the process continues, and now we're getting back to the significance of one, the significance of each individual voice. Now, although it may seem as though one is just a small piece of the puzzle, as we continue to expand and look at the bigger picture of the individual, we would find that your individual voice is directly connected still today to the establishment, as we review it, of the development of authority. As I continue to expand on the significance of your individual voice, allow me to bring forward this example related to rights and freedoms. The four founders responsible for the establishment of rights and freedoms also included what I like to call is something similar to background protection related to the preservation of it. So, if rights and freedoms was, say, an operating system, like a computer, the four founders included a stipulation that could be described as something similar to an antivirus, if you will. And that stipulation is that authority requires individual consent. Now, once again, getting back to the significance of the individual and how your individual voice really truly does have authority that exists still today. I'm going to explain that authority in three different ways. First of all, you as an individual, should you bring forward a claim against another or a group, the established authority is responsible to recognize your claim and defend it. Follow that through with the process of evaluation, including determining accountability if or when necessary. Now let's say you're on the flip side of that coin, and you are the one that's being accused. A claim has been brought against you. The established authority has the responsibility to defend you and your right to defend yourself with the intention and hope of having your voice recognized. So that's two ways that your voice has a significant authority and impact related to the establishment of authority as we review human history. Lastly, your individual voice has significance and authority as part of a collective voice, meaning, should a group of individual voices come together as a collective under the impression that the current established authority is not protecting the rights and freedoms according to the satisfaction of the people, that collective voice has the ability to hold accountable systems and services of government, including an overview of leadership and influencing restructuring when necessary. So essentially, a collective voice really does have the ability to influence and demand integrity within governments. And considering that we're all a part of a collective voice related to the growth of humanity, if we're going to expect integrity amongst our governments, it appears safe to say that we would do well to consider our own understanding and level of commitment related to our individual integrity. So the answer to the question, who then has supreme power authority, the individual or governments? I'm going to propose both. Expand both individual and government sovereign integrity moving into the future. I think that's enough information for this video, so I'm going to leave this full slide up on the screen for a moment once again and encourage you to take a screenshot to help you to reflect on the information you've been presented with today, including watching the video one or two more times before moving on to video number 4.